They got a little boneyard area set up over here. And this is really fascinating. Take a look at this old helicopter here. This is the Hiller H-23 Raven. And then you got a F-7F with Marine Corps logo on it. Then another airplane over here, and I'm not really sure what that is. Pretty impressive though. You come over here and you can see this engine in a crate. This is one of the early jet engines, and this is the shipping container that they would ship them in. Interesting thing about this is these containers, you see right here, they had a rubber seal. And then they would close them together. They would put a desiccant in there that would keep it from getting any moisture and preserve the engine. So moving over here, again, this Tiger Cat's pretty impressive. I like those great big old engines on there. Had a pair of R2800s. This is a Lockheed Lodestar. I love how low the fuselage sits to the ground. And then there's another Lodestar right over here. Boy, that is pretty cool looking. Now I'll show you something else. It's not part of the boneyard. But take a look way up there. Somebody's flying a gyrocopter. I hope I was able to catch it. Anyway, back to the boneyard. We have a Beechcraft SNB-5, which is basically a military version of the Twin Beech Model 18. This old bird looks like she needs a little bit of loving. Kind of getting quite deteriorated. Look at all these planes. So let's look at the rest of the aircraft here in the boneyard. And we got an A4 Skyhawk. Pretty neat airplane.
Just add to the traffic.
And over here, this is the F8 Crusader, and you can tell that by that variable angle of incidence wing. It's pretty cool. Hydraulic ram pushes it up, and then they don't have to pitch up so much when they're landing and taking off. Pretty cool. I like this great big old air intake on this airplane too. It's like a great big old mouth. Here we have the A7 Corsair 2. Guy I know years ago used to fly those. Navy trainer. And this is a Hispano HA200 Alpha. Well, you're looking right at the business end of it right there. Then we have a couple more over here. Okay, so we have an F-104 Starfighter. Pretty sharp looking bird. and an FJ3 Fury. And then over here is an F-84 Thunderstreak. Looking back over there, there's a T-33 Shooting Star. And I can't quite make out what that one is behind it. The one that's kind of light green. Anyway, got a couple pieces of ground equipment here. That's an old ambulance that was used in World War II. And here is a Sherman tank. $49,000 of those built. I had no idea there were that many of those made. Then over there, we got a nose section of a B-29. Lucky Lady 2. One correction to make, that's actually a B-50A Super Fortress. And they got a complete one at Pima Air and Space Museum. I love looking at all these old airplanes. Looking at the OV-1A over here, the way those engines sit so far out on the wing, I bet that thing is a nightmare when a single engine performance. Man, check that out, that's wild. But I bet you got some good visibility in there. All right, so let's take a look at some of the rest of the airplanes. There's the L-29 Delphin. F-86 Saberjet. Here's the F-100D Super Sabre. F-84K Thunderflash. And the end of the line here is an A4 Skyhawk. Look at the speed brakes on the back of the wing of that. Now that is impressive. Tribute to all of those impacted by this tragic conflict. Let's see what they got here. Got a signboard here, Korean War. And in the back, there is a MiG that is set up as if it crashed. And here we go, MiG Alley. This is really a neat setup here because, as you can see, it's made to look like the MiG was shot down. And if you look over here, you can see the American plane flying on. That's awesome. Just look at all these signboards. They really are nice. This is a very well put together memorial. As you can see, the MiG in the distance flying on the ground and the Sabre jet flying away victoriously. My hat's off to whoever put this together. I always like looking at these signboards. It's always got a lot of good information on there. F-86 Sweet Rose. Okay, let's go in the next hangar here. Looks like we have some jet fighters in here. Oh wow. Beauteous Butch. Yeah, this is neat. These are Korean War airplanes. This is a Nat T. This looks like it would just be so much fun to fly. Up here, looks like we have a MiG-15. That is really impressive right there. Cockpit makeup, the Huff. Oh, that's pretty. Look at this jet here. This right here is an F-68, or excuse me, 86, F-86. Boy, would it be fun to see these fly or what? Ooh, now we're getting into some really neat stuff over here. I like the speed brakes on the back of the F-86. This here looks like a little racing plane. Don't have much of a wingspan at all. This is a float plane here. Curtiss D12 engine. That's pretty cool. I love engines. This right here was the Curtiss R3C Racer. It had a 619 horsepower engine. For as small as that thing is, I bet it would get the job done too. Here we have a GB. This looks like a mock-up. I don't believe it might be the real thing. I love this Debrecen float plane here. This is a 1913 airplane. Boy, that's hard to believe. This airplane right here is over 110 years old. Look at the big old wooden floats on it. Has some craftsmanship right there. Here we have a Howard DGA-5. Call this the Ike. Boy, they got them packed in here too. Here's the Mach-E M39, little Italian airplane. It actually has a Fiat engine in it. It's pretty interesting. Now this little racing plane here, this looks like it would be something wild to fly. Got another plane over here for racing. Reach way out and get a good video of this float plane. This here was built in 1913. Well, look at the structure. Now we have a MiG-17. And yet another MiG. You can see the racing planes up on the top. Fascinating. This bird here is the MiG-21. See, it's a pretty radical design difference from the MiG-17 and the MiG-15. This museum is something else. Here we have the Douglas Skyrocket. That's a pretty neat looking airplane right there. Gloucester Meteor. This was the British's first fighter jet.